Welcome to the Texas Probate Real Estate Podcast. We come to you to share with you people in the industry, people who are in probate, helping people through this most difficult process. And I'm Jeremy Kritt, your host with Texas Probate Real Estate, a branch of Kritt Real Estate that is exclusively devoted to helping executors, administrators, personal representatives, and heirs sell property that's in probate profitably and as is. We're not investors. We're not looking to take advantage of people going through the probate process. We want to help them get the most amount of money in the least amount of time so that the people who are inheriting the proceeds of the real estate really get the full benefit of what was left behind for them. I am joined here today with Nancy Perry Eaton, who is an attorney who specializes in probate. She's based in the Temple Belton area, but she does help people in a wider geographical area. And I'm just so glad to have her on here. She's just really an example of one of the great professionals that is out here doing it and really helping people. Nancy, I really want to welcome you to our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Nancy, what I'd like to do is I want to introduce you to our audience, and please share with us a little bit about how you got into law, how long you've been practicing law, how you got into the probate space, and just anything you want to share with us.
I've been a licensed Texas attorney for 33 years, coming up on 34. And I got into probate because that was my favorite class in law school. But then now that I'm actually practicing it, one thing that you always have to be mindful of is these are people that have lost a loved one and they're grieving. And you take that very seriously. And when somebody comes in my office for the first time, the first thing I do is tell them, I'm very sorry for your loss. And so that's one of the things that you just need to be mindful of is dealing with widows and widowers. And a lot of times they're lonely and they stop by the office and they just want to talk because they want somebody to talk to, and we're always around. But that's one of the things that I really enjoy about probate is helping people work through that, because I tell people they come in and all they see is trees and they don't know where to go. And I said, I see past those trees and I see the beach where you're going to end up. So, we got you.
That's awesome. Nancy, what do you find when people come to you initially for that initial consultation? What is the main concern that you normally see them having? And I'm actually kind of curious because, I'm in the real estate side. I'm not a lawyer. So when I come into contact with people in this situation, they've kind of already gone through a lot of the legal process. I'm kind of curious as to that initial contact that you have. What are they concerned about? And I'm also kind of interested to know, is there maybe a mismatch or they're concerned about something and actually they should maybe be concerned about something else? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when they come in, the first thing I do is what's in the estate. And that will determine because in Texas, there's various ways you can do things. You can probate the will as a muniment of title, which is a very short, brief type of probate. And it's usually to transfer real estate. And if all they have is just the house, then that's really all we need to do if there's no other debts or anything. Then there's, did they have a will? Let me look at the will. Did they not have a will? Okay, well then if you die without a will, the state of Texas dictates where your stuff goes. And so then we look at who are the heirs and, that type of thing. And just kind of figuring out what's in the estate and what can I do for them. Sometimes it's just as simple as an affidavit of heirship, which is an affidavit signed by two disinterested witnesses and I generally only do them for ones where it's husband and wife and neither one of them had kids from other marriages. They only had kids during their marriage. So pretty much it goes to the wife and it's pretty easy. What I've been finding lately is that title companies have started rejecting these affidavits of heirship. They don't like them much anymore.
That's interesting. Tell me more about that. That's actually quite interesting to me.
And I even talked to a good friend of mine who's an attorney. She was a title attorney.
Mhm.
and she quit to go in to do probate law. And when I talked to her about why are we having these problems with these affidavits of heirship, and she said, well, the title companies had claims on them, and so now they're very skittish because you can get anybody to sign something that, oh yeah, well, we're not going to worry about this one kid over here. We're just going to say these are the only kids, and so it can cause problems with your title. And so that friend of mine basically said that's why I closed down my title company and my business, because it's just getting too difficult.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. And that's a new development that you're seeing in the field?
Right, right.
Why do you think that is? I mean, Texas law, the wheels are turning. It's papers moving around. And I know as a real estate professional, I do many deals every year that are affidavits of heirship. So that's why I haven't heard that. But you would be much more in tune being an attorney with that. Why do you think maybe that is now becoming more of an issue versus maybe before it really wasn't being scrutinized so much?
Yeah, I think what my friend was telling me is that these title companies have had some claims
Okay.
where somebody did an affidavit and left out an heir, and then the
Oh,
heir
okay.
found out, and then there's a claim on, they issued a title policy based on that affidavit of heirship, which was incorrect.
Hmm.
And you don't know if your witnesses who are supposed to be disinterested witnesses, if they're wink, wink, nod, nod, yeah, just leave that kid out.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and so that's made them very nervous about them.
That's actually, Nancy, very, very interesting. And thank you for sharing that. That's the first I've heard of that. And that's very interesting. Let me ask you a quick question. So one of the things I notice in my real estate practice is sometimes maybe when people reach out to me or, they're referred by someone, have a little intake with them, talk with them, see what's going on. Now, obviously, I'm not an attorney, so I have to refer it out when, it needs certain work, that requires an attorney. But what's interesting is some title companies will offer to do an affidavits of heirship just to kind of help move things along. I'm curious from your point of view as a licensed Texas attorney, is there a difference between, let's say, a family goes to, they say, okay, look, there's 3 or 4 brothers and sisters. We're all on the same page, and the title company says they'll do it for us, maybe a little bit of a cheaper price, because they're counting on that, they'll do the title policy with the transaction. Do you think there's a difference between maybe a title company doing that process versus maybe going in your law office? Is there any kind of difference of scrutiny of how you approach the affidavits of heirship? I'm actually quite curious to know what you think about that.
Yeah, because title companies have done affidavits of heirship. And so I actually had some people in my office and I said, well, just let your title company draft the affidavit of heirship.
Okay.
And they came back and said the title company refused.
Okay. So they don't want to be in that business.
They
They
don't
don't
want
want
to
to.
be in that business anymore.
Okay. Okay.
And I've found myself being very careful about it. There are several lawyers' Facebook groups
Hmm.
that are just closed groups just for attorneys. And there's a Texas probate lawyers Facebook group. And people will post things, they'll ask questions. I'll do searches on there to find answers to things.
Hmm.
I was doing some searches on what is going on with these affidavits of heirship. And it might be just the area because some attorneys were saying they were having problems with it. And then another attorney chimed in and said, I've been doing them all along just fine. I've never had any problems. So it could be this area that the title companies in this area had a claim filed on them. And so now they're
Okay.
just shut everything down. But that friend of mine who was a title attorney, she was in Fort Worth and
Mhm.
they were running into the same thing.
That's very interesting. I've been doing real estate for close to 10 years, not quite yet, but I've been doing it for a little while now. Affidavits of heirship it's so common. I see it so frequently, but I think you're highlighting the need to be very careful in the research and in the vetting of the witnesses that are involved and not just trying to push it through, right? And sometimes that's a
Right.
temptation. I know in real estate, at least, that is always a temptation. In my own firm, Kritt Real Estate, I used to sponsor many more agents. And obviously I had supervisory responsibilities with those agents as the broker. And one of the things I would always tell agents that, and I still have I have an agent actually that I still sponsor, but I don't really actively try to sponsor a lot of agents anymore. But one of the things I would tell my agents is don't try to just push the transaction through. Don't cut corners. Know your customer, know their situation. Stay in your lane. We're real estate agents. We're not attorneys. We're not accountants. We're not financial planners. Stick to your lane. We have our competence. We have our role. And when they need that extra help, don't play attorney, don't play legal advisor. Send them to a qualified person. That's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, by the way, because for example, I can't give legal advice on affidavits of heirship, but I can certainly bring someone that can talk about it, right? And we can share that with the public. And if people need help, they can reach out and you can be one of our referral partners that we can send people to if we need to. So it's very important. There's a lot of information on the internet about these topics that's either outdated or not accurate. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, that, and there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, and then ChatGPT is just making a mess of a lot of things as well.
Let's talk about that a little bit. That's very interesting. Let me share with you a very interesting experience I had recently, and then you can share kind of what you're finding. So I'm an avid user of AI. I'm a power user. I am very into it. I'm not just using it as a glorified Google search. I'm actually doing really serious work with AI, but it doesn't replace, obviously, the years of experience I have, the hundreds of deals I've done, just like the hundreds of thousands of cases you have done, right? You learn something from every case, you learn something for every transaction, and that builds a lot of context, right, around people's unique situations. And I recently had an experience where I was on a listing appointment, and it was a referral, so there was a much higher trust involved versus just someone who I didn't know, and we're just kind of getting to know each other. I was there doing my listing presentation, and he was bought into what I was doing. He wanted to do business together. So obviously we get to the paperwork, right? We need the listing agreement. We have disclosures, et cetera, et cetera. And he started taking a picture right in front of me of every single paper. So there's a lot of papers, Nancy, like to sign a listing with someone. I mean, it's like maybe 20 pages or 30 pages of stuff. And he was scanning it, putting in a ChatGPT. ChatGPT was giving him questions to ask me. And that was a very interesting experience, Nancy, because he was asking me questions and I was like, well, that's true, but it doesn't apply to your case. Or yes, that makes sense, but you shouldn't be concerned about it because of X, Y, Z. These things are how your situation is. And so, it doesn't apply to you. So it was kind of like we were burning a lot of time. And also, like, ChatGPT was sending him down rabbit holes that were not really productive for him. And of course, you have to respect the client, and it's part of his due diligence, right? Ask questions. I'm sure with your clients, right, you welcome questions, right? Even if you don't know the answer, you'll get back to them, right? So it's normal, and we want to encourage our clients to have questions. But it was a little bit like, if that's your sole source, or if you're trusting that source more than me, you're going to have a problem because you only do this maybe once every 7 years. I'm doing it every day, and things have changed, right? You may not have the perspective. So that's what I'm seeing in my real estate world. What are you seeing in the legal world, in your legal practice related to this and probate?
Well, I'm seeing people draft pleadings and file court cases with the ChatGPT, but they don't check the actual cited statutes, which I had one that both parties were located in Texas, and he put in an interstate statute when you got one party that's in state, one party that's out of state, and kept citing that statute over and over and over. And I was like, you didn't even double check it.
Right. So they're trying to be a lawyer. They don't understand how the law works, the different kinds of statutes, how they apply to their case. Do you find them getting into trouble? What's the result of that?
I won.
Okay. Oh, was this a litigation in the probate? Okay, got it. So tell me a little bit more about the situation. Like, set it up for us.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a probate litigation. It was a family law matter. I think it was an enforcement, and it didn't go anywhere. It just wasted a lot of time and stuff. But, and getting back to those affidavits of heirship, When we spoke last week, we were talking about one of my clients had one of those We Buy Ugly Houses type companies, approach her to buy her dad's house. And
Nancy, let me set this up. Let me set this up for our audience. Okay. Thank you so much for bringing this up, Nancy. I really wanted to talk about this with you on the podcast. So one of the things at Texas Probate Real Estate that we preach, okay, it's on our website, it's on all of our marketing material, is what makes us different is that we are 100% fiduciaries to our clients. As a licensed broker, I have a legal fiduciary duty to my client. In a probate situation, it's actually to the estate. The executor, administrator, they're a fiduciary for the estate. They hire me. Yes, they're my client, if you will, but really the estate is my client, really. And so I take that very seriously. So we're not investors trying to buy a home from the estate. But as I shared with Nancy and kind of prep for the podcast, that one of the things that probate executors and administrators experience, it's actually before they're appointed. Once the filing happens, everyone descends because we know that a lot of estates are going to sell the properties. All over the country, investors who are flipping houses or even wholesalers, which a lot of people don't realize what those are. Wholesalers are people who are actually making a contract. They'll either use the Texas real estate 1-to-4 family residential contract, or a lot of times they use a proprietary contract, which it has no protections for the seller. This is one of the things I think, Nancy, you'll appreciate this, right? One of the beauties of the Texas Real Estate Commission is that we have this wonderful contract that is very fair to both parties. It really has all of the protections there. It has the major points for negotiation there for the meeting of the minds. And it's been litigated a lot. So there's predictability, right, in the contract. There's really of how the transaction is going to go down. And so a lot of these investors, they have their own contracts. And, they think, the average public goes, oh, well, it's simple, right? But then they don't realize when there's a problem, it's like they don't have recourse. They don't have remedies like in the contract that they can address if something goes wrong. Anyway, but these wholesalers come in and they make a contract, but they're not the end buyer. They're actually making a contract, locking up the property, looking for a buyer, and they may or may not get the buyer, and they're wasting the seller's time, right? Versus in our case, we're interested in not getting the lowest value for the estate. We're looking at getting the highest value for this estate, as is, if needed, and in the shortest amount of time. And so Nancy was sharing with me a very interesting story of a transaction that occurred that she has a lot of questions about. And I would say, Nancy, what you're about to share with us is, I think, very common, and it's a cautionary tale. So I just wanted to set that up. Nancy, tell me all about it.
Well, my client's father died, and he died without a will. So if you die without a will, the type of probate is called an independent administration. Well, there's dependent and independent. Independent is where all the heirs sign a document saying we agree to be independent, which means the judge swears in the administrator and says, go do your thing and don't bother me. The only other contact you have with the court is filing the inventory. Versus a dependent administration where if you have some holdouts, some heirs that are, I'm not signing anything, then you have to go dependent, which means every time you sneeze, you got to go to court to get permission to do it, to sell a house, to pay your attorney, to do all this stuff. So we were trying to do an independent administration, meaning all the heirs had to sign off. And then part of that independent administration, the court will appoint an attorney ad litem to represent all the unknown heirs, and they will research and they will talk to people and they will do their own research, and then they will file a report with the court saying these are the heirs. Then the judge will do a judgment declaring these are the heirs and these are their percentage shares. So then when the house gets sold, everything gets divided according to that judgment. We didn't get that far in this one. My client contacted me and said, well, I've got this company, they're going to buy Dad's house. Okay. She had listed, because a lot of times you get information from obituaries, and she said, well, these are the siblings, these are the heirs. And we said, but wait a minute, in your obituary, you listed some other siblings. Oh, well, no, those are my kids. I just put them in there like they were siblings. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. The thing that was in this company, well, I've hired this company. They're going to pay your attorney's fees, which they did. She was going to be appointed the administrator of the estate. We haven't even filed anything yet. She signed a contract with this company to sell this house. And I'm like, what authority do you have to sign that contract right now? You're not even the administrator. This contract is not even valid, but they did it anyway. And so we were working on doing the administration. We were working on figuring out who the heirs were and just going through that whole mess. And I called her about something and she said, we sold the house. You sold the house. Okay. How in the world did you do that? We just did affidavits of heirship. So God knows who those heirs were. I don't even know if they closed with a title company. That was the end of that.
Let's break that down. That's very interesting. And by the way, we were talking about this a little bit pre-show, Nancy, when we were preparing together. There is a area of real estate investors, it's like they have their own little private Facebook groups, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're kind of like going for like deals that have like title issues or things like this. Let's say very creative transactions. And what you're saying is kind of very interesting because what I find with investors, especially that are targeting probate, what I find is it's kind of like they're the Wild West. They went to some seminar with some guru and they're doing a bunch of stuff and they're not in real estate, right? I'm not saying all of them, but most of them, they don't come from a real estate background. Like it wouldn't be like for me, for example, like I have a real estate license. I've done many transactions, professionally accountable for what I do. So I have to really stay in my lane within the laws of Texas and all of that. Well, everyone has to follow within the laws of Texas, but being licensed, I have a certain level of accountability that maybe just someone who doesn't have a license have. Mm-hmm. And I find like they go to the seminar and like they think that 5 hours and a lunch is like now they've got it down. They know what's going on, right? Which is interesting because it shows you, there's a lot of wisdom in the Texas licensing law, by the way, that has new real estate agents be under a broker because it's like, there is some like apprenticeship or mentoring you need because you're dealing with high value assets, you're dealing with very serious issues, and you can really do damage if you don't know what you're doing. But in this case, it's just self-interested, right? So it's kind of like what I was saying earlier, like they're trying to like ram the deals, right? They're trying to ram the deals through, turn and burn, get as many transactions as possible, as quickly as possible. Can you kind of break down for me, like, what legally, potentially, based on just your knowledge of these facts, what's some of the fallout or problems that people could have? Like this woman or man who did this, like what could come back to them if this is what you think it was?
Well, there could be an heir that was left off that affidavit of heirship, and maybe it's the sister nobody likes or something. Well, if sister finds out, she can sue and she can go for her claim. If they did close with a title company, then they could file a claim with the title company. There's the question, I don't think she even had authority to sign a contract with this company to begin with. She should have gotten her letters of administration. Then you sign your contract with your real estate company, not before. And so there's just all kinds of problems that could have, come up with this. And she did all this just without talking to me. Just, I sold the house. It's done.
Nancy, what's coming to my mind as I'm hearing you is we're getting into a time where we have a lot of knowledge, we have access to a lot of information, but in areas like, for example, law, or medicine, it's not just like having I'm reading let's say the statute, right? I'm just reading the plain language of the text, right? There's case law, right? There's also like how courts operate. Their procedures can be different from one to the other, right? And so there's a lot more to it. In real estate, it's similar. Granted, there are a lot of real estate agents that are out there. Not all of them are the same. Not all of them have the same level of competence or experience. Like if you take a very experienced broker that has a lot of transactions under their belt, similar to like yourself, an attorney that has a lot of cases under their belt, you're looking at this on a bird's eye view. And I'm sure, I've no doubt about it, you're able to see the whole field and you know the landmines, you know the strategy, like maybe you can approach it various ways, but given the people involved or the facts, maybe it's better, we can do this, but maybe it's better to go this way, more chance of success, a better outcome, right? And I feel that we're kind of diminished, like as people have more, and by the way, I'm going to say this, I want to get your feedback on this, is like as we have more available knowledge and we can get very quick answers, and there seems to be less and less trust for people in professions, like, for example, law or medicine. We feel like we can figure the whole thing out ourselves. Also, we're trying to save money, right? We're trying to save money. We think we can save money by trying to figure it out ourselves. What do you see in terms of like, do you agree that that's the case? And if so, what would you say to people out there that are maybe trying to like DIY it? What's your take on that?
Doing probate with houses, we deal with a lot of realtors, and I've seen some realtors that don't need to be in the real estate business. They do things like, I personally don't think you can sign, an executor has the authority to sign a listing agreement until they're appointed the executor, but they're doing it anyway. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. And so we run across real estate agents that really don't have a clue. They don't understand that, well, wait a minute, this house is in both husband and wife's name. Husband died years ago and now wife died. You still can't sell this thing. You got to go back and deal with husband, his estate first, and then deal with it. And there's a lot of stuff. I don't know how much law they teach in real estate classes, but to me, it doesn't seem like there's enough of it, because there's some very inexperienced realtors that don't really need to be doing that.
So that's interesting. Even this kind of conversation, it's very rare, right? So that's one of the reasons why I did this podcast, because, okay, I'm doing probate real estate, and real estate agents don't interact with attorneys on a personal level very often. And usually if they do, it's not for a good reason, you know what I'm saying? But you're right. Let me speak to something that you just shared, and I agree with it. It's something kind of interesting from my perspective. So I'm a by the book broker. And I'm not saying this to kind of like elevate myself. I mean this very sincerely. As a real estate broker with their own firm, I have a much higher level of responsibility in my actions. I can't hide under my broker. I am the broker. I'm the owner of this company. So it kind of, the buck stops with me, and so it's kind of like what I was sharing earlier. One of the things I would always tell agents I sponsor is don't try to ram transactions through. Know your customer. Don't start with trying to sign them up. What do they need? What service do they need? How can you help them? Start from a position of service. And if you can do it and you can give them a path to do it, then do business. If you feel you can't do it, come to me. I'll help you do it. Or if we need to refer them out to someone else, then we'll take a referral fee, and that's okay too. But what I find is, especially with probate real estate is a little bit different from a normal real estate transaction, right? The average agent is, what's the situation? They're called by Sally, Sue, and Tim, and you're going over to the house, and you get your tie on, and you're at the kitchen table, and you're given your little listing presentation, and he got a job transfer or something like that. And so it's very kind of cut and dry. It's very vanilla. It's very like normal, like real estate 101 school kind of stuff, right? But in this case, when you're dealing with, this is from my experience, is that, with probate real estate, that's what I call it. I call it probate real estate, is that it's different because you're intersecting with the law in different ways, right? You've got a client who they may have 2 or 3 other heirs. And even though they're the decider, even though yes, they have the legal authority, they're acting with consensus with the other family members. And sometimes you have to bring them in because, yes, this person has legal decision-making authority, but they're doing it with other people. And if you leave those people out, one, you might not get the business, but more importantly, you may have problems because you're not in alignment with the people involved, right? Or like what you said here, the real estate agents are going in and signing contracts with people that don't have the authority yet. We don't do that. I don't do that. I always ask and I confirm in my listing appointments, Nancy, when I go there, I want to see the letters. I want to physically inspect them. I want to see what it says. I want to know, is it independent? Is it dependent? That's going to be a huge difference. If you don't know what these things are, you're going to have problems. You're going to make mistakes. And so knowledge of the process, like you don't have to be an attorney, but you have to have at least, I believe, some knowledge of what this process is. Otherwise, you're going to make these mistakes. And I think real estate agents, just to give you a little kind of context, I think real estate agents are, when we start out, we're kind of taught to like, don't leave there without getting the listing agreement signed, right? Then you're probably not getting it. You wasted the opportunity. That might be okay with Tiny Tim and Sally Sue, that might be okay. Now, some people might disagree with that approach, but it can work. But for something like this, in my point of view, it's like, no, we got to make sure, like, okay, have you received letters of testamentary? Do we have letters of administration? What kind of administration? Who are the heirs? How many heirs are in this estate? Are you guys getting along? Asking some questions to understand what's going on. And I think that's the difference between being very transactional, like approaching the real estate business as just a transactional basis versus going to more of a relational model, starting with the client first. If it makes sense, I'll get paid. It doesn't matter. So what's going on with them? How can I help them? I get paid. Just like you do, I get paid when I help them. So let's start with, how can I help you? Right. So it's a different mindset. And I think a lot of real estate agents don't have that. I think you're right to criticize that, Nancy.
Right. Especially with the dependent administration. You can't sell that house until the court signs the judge signs an order allowing you to sell that house. And
right.
We've got one that we were working with the real estate agent, and they just, has the judge signed the order? And every day it was like, no, not yet, not yet. Then the judge did sign the order, so you guys are good to go with that. So it'd be kind of scary to think that there's real estate agents that don't know what that is and just, let's go ahead and close. Oh, gosh.
They really don't. They really don't. That's why it's very important that's why I'm kind of proud about what I do. In a way, if I can say that, it's like, that's the difference, right? That's the difference with working with someone who has some specialization, some knowledge. I think it's true of attorneys too. This is not critical of attorneys. I mean, because we like to have attorneys on the show, so it's not a criticism to the attorneys out here, the wonderful Texas attorneys that are doing business out here. I think it's true for attorneys, right, Nancy? Like, let's say I have a complex immigration problem. Can any attorney do immigration law? Can you legally do?
Yeah,
of course, right? Like, let's say I have my family. This is a case of whether like my wife is going to be deported or not. I'm probably not going to go to the the real estate attorney, right? The guy who does real estate contracts all day, right? The law is very expansive. I find the law very interesting, right? It's so vast. There's so many little areas. You have attorneys that just focus on water rights. It's just water rights. That's the only thing they do, or oil and gas. Like, even in real estate, like, there's just these little slivers of like knowledge base. And like, if I had a water problem, I got this ranch, right? I got my neighbor messing up my crop. It's high stakes, right? So I'm not going to go to just any guy, right? I'm going to go to someone who understands how this works, right? Would you say that's true in like probate, trust, this kind of thing? Attorneys, they're specializing in this area. They might have a little bit more context.
Yeah, and there's a state bar rule that says an attorney, we're not to take something that we're not competent to handle. So if somebody walked in with an immigration question, I'd send them somewhere else because, I could probably get up to speed on it if I cared, but I did some immigration and I didn't like it.
Okay. Yeah. The same rule exists with the Texas Real Estate Licensing Act and the Texas Real Estate Commission, and also the Realtor Code of Ethics as well. Not all real estate agents are realtors, but all realtors are licensed real estate agents. But the Realtor Code of Ethics with the National Association of Realtors is a trade group. In the Code of Ethics, it also says the same thing. And so do the TREC rules, which is, if you're not experienced or knowledgeable about an area of real estate, because you're not going to see me try to sell a building, for example, right? I'm not qualified to sell an office tower in downtown Austin. There are people at Cushman and Wakefield that will do that. That's all they do, right? But they also wouldn't be very good in residential real estate, right? So, we have our lanes just like you. It wouldn't be ethical for me to do other kinds of real estate that I don't know. What's interesting, though, Nancy, is that if you look at real estate in probate, I'm just kind of just thinking about what you just said. It's a residential transaction, right? It's a residential transaction, but it has other factors to it that if you don't know those things, you can hurt people. You can mess things up, right? Like you were just mentioning, like, let's say, for example, I'm just thinking of this situation, like it's a dependent administration, the agent's just rolling through. Well, now the buyer thinks they're going a traditional timeline, and then they find out later, oh, wait, there's this court thing that has to happen. Now, maybe they lose their rate lock, and now they're damaged. That could cause damage to another party. That could be a problem. There are cases in real estate that are litigated over timelines and things like that. The person that's doing the transaction had a right to know, right, that this is pending court approval.
And an experienced realtor would have been able to say, okay, this is a dependent administration, so we got to go through this court process. I mean, it didn't take long. It took, a couple weeks. But boy, a couple of weeks is a lifetime to realtors when they want to close.
Yeah, it can be. Nancy, I really like people like you. You're the battle-tested veterans out here that, you know what I mean? Like, you're very nice and personable, but I can also sense from you, like, kind of no nonsense too. It's like, you know what's going on. Yeah, like, let's get to the point. Give us your wisdom. Give us your advice. Give some agents out there advice. Give these personal representatives who might be watching this some advice that what you're seeing out here and that you wish you could tell them. And I'm going to be totally quiet. You just go for it. You tell us what you think.
Well, to me, it's pretty critical to have a good relationship with a good realtor because you've got lots of houses and estates that need to be sold. And I get people, the heirs live out of state and they come in maybe just for the court hearing and to kind of clean out the house and that type of thing. They don't know anybody in this area. So I like to be able to refer them to a realtor who's like a one-stop shop. Oh, okay, Dad was a hoarder. Yeah, nope, I got you. I got somebody that can clean all that out. I got to go back to Indiana, but what am I going to do with the lawn? Nope, no problem. We'll get this done. We need to do a little work here and there. And I love getting the feedback from my clients when they had a really good experience with their realtor and they said, thank you for referring me to this person. They were just a godsend to us. And that makes me look good because if I refer them to a realtor who screws it all up and does a crappy job, then that reflects on me. And I don't like that.
Absolutely.
So I like to be able to, I got you, and here's somebody that's got you too. We're going to help you. We're going to take care of this. Everything from estate sales to, like I said, the hoarder house. Oh my God, Dad was a bad hoarder. How am I going to get rid of all this stuff? And then just being able to sell it and get the best price given whatever the market is. And it just makes it seamless. If you have a good, validly drafted will, probate is pretty seamless. We're done in 2 or 3 months. It may take a little longer to sell the house, but it's not as awful as some people think it is. Now, yeah, you're going to get some awful cases where the heirs are fighting and you've got will contests, or you've got a will that somebody decided they would just draft it up on Google or ChatGPT or something, and it's just a complete mess. That's a whole different, that's another ball game, but a whole different ball game. Having that good relationship with like a CPA, I've got CPAs. I refer my estates to the CPA so they can do their final tax return. Here's a realtor, we're a one-stop shop and everybody will get taken care of. And I end up with happy clients, and that's the ultimate goal.
I love that. I love that very much. I really resonate with what you said because it's exactly the same for me. When I refer someone to someone, and if it didn't work out, that reflects poorly on me because it's my referral, right? So it's like I did the thing that was wrong or bad or not great. So it's so important to have those relationships, and it's so interesting and refreshing to hear you say that, because it's like, wow, yeah, I totally get it, because the same for me. Just like, let's say you were to refer to me, then I maybe refer to other people. It's like, it's a chain. It's this chain that goes back to the source. So absolutely. What would you say specifically to let's say a personal representative, or someone who's maybe they're very early, they haven't yet filed, right? They haven't yet filed. They're maybe looking for an attorney. They're thinking about like, oh my God, what to do? Because I think there's a little bit like, no one gets a class in high school. Okay, when someone dies, this is what you do, right? Well, or if they did, I missed that class. I guess I missed that class in university. What can you say to them that would be very helpful, or that you wish if you could get to them very early on, like when that thought first went in their mind? What would you want to tell them?
Just that it's not as daunting as it looks. People get overwhelmed. And I tell people, they'll come in and they're just completely overwhelmed. And I tell them, look, you don't have to do this right now. You've got 4 years from the date of death. If you need to take some time and come back. And usually they don't. Rarely do they say, yeah, I'm going to take some time on this. Usually they're just, let's rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with. Just kind of assuring them that we've got it, we're on top of it. We're going to get this taken care of. And then the other thing that I encourage my executors and my administrators to do is be upfront, open, and honest with information with the other heirs. Let them know what's going on. Sometimes these executors, they get power hungry. They're like, well, I'm in power now. I'm not going to tell you anything. And I represent the executor, so I don't represent the rest of the family members. And so unless my client authorizes me, we keep the family in the loop. What I found is if you get somebody that says, well, I'm not going to tell you anything, I'm not going to give you a copy of the will, I'm not going to do anything, and you get no information, that raises red flags all over the place. And then they end up hiring an attorney, and here we are, because nobody will give them information. And I tell them, don't do that. We're all an open book. Here's the house. Here's the bank accounts. Here it all is. This is what we're doing. Don't play power trip with the other heirs.
So have some humility. Have some humility and openness. That's good advice. That's good advice. Very good advice.
Like when my parents passed away in 2018, and my mom and dad named my brother and sister and I, all three of us, executors of the estate. And I said, Dad, please don't do that. We don't get along. But my sister is the financial spreadsheet lady. And we got spreadsheets every week of here's what came in, here's what out. Just so, and I was like, okay, I got you. Fine. I don't need all this. But, we never once doubted that she was doing anything with anything. And it's that silence that makes people wonder, because you're talking money. Yeah. And a lot of times, we see it all the time. You've got the crooked relative that comes in and starts taking stuff. And, and part of the executor's job is to secure that house. And, if they have to change the locks and do whatever they need to do, park cars and move the cars around, just to put the little lights on that turn off and on, just to make it. Their job is to secure that property. And it may also include, well, I'm sorry, but I can't just let you in the house to go grab stuff. We'll do this in an organized manner. But sometimes the crooked relatives get to the house first and start grabbing stuff. And sometimes they grab a will. They look at the will and they're like, I've been cut out. Well, that will disappears. Guess what? I'm back in.
Oh, wow.
I've seen that happen too many times.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Attorneys, when they accept our invitation to come on the podcast, because, you're busy and you've got clients that you're dealing with. And I just want to thank you very much for being on the podcast. I know that this is really a great thing for people who will see it. We never know who's going to see it. It's very interesting, Nancy. I just got a call not related to the podcast, but this morning, but from another online initiative I have of just sharing information. I very much believe in marketing through content that's helpful, not just, hey, look at me, how great I am, but really sharing value with the community and hoping that people, when they see that, they'll respond and want to work with someone like me or you. So I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to help people. What I want to do now is just before we go, Nancy, how can people reach you? What are some reasons why they might want to contact you? Contact information. Tell our audience how they can get in touch with you.
Well, our office is in Harker Heights, and the website is perryeatonlaw.com. So
Okay, perryeatonlaw.com. Okay, good. We'll put that in the show notes. Sorry, go ahead.
I tell people I don't charge for consultations for probates. So people get so much misinformation and their friends get in their ear and their friends tell them what they're supposed to do. It only costs you a little bit of time. You can either schedule a phone consultation or come in person. Just talk to me and let me see if there's anything that we should do, or I'll tell you what you need to do. And if everything is fine and we don't need to do a probate, then you're good. But when somebody dies, go in and talk to a probate lawyer and just ask, do I need to do anything? Doesn't cost you anything but time, and it could save you a lot of heartache and money if you make a mistake.
That's very good advice. That's very good advice. And we encourage our audience to contact you, and we're going to put all of your contact information in the show notes for this episode, so that if people, after hearing this, want to reach you, they'll have all of your information, and we'll make sure that all of that's there. Nancy, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and hopefully we can have you on in the future. My guests I have on, I always tell them it'd be cool if we could do another episode at some time in the future. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me.